to my Egg Whisperer fertility Q&A, basically being called Ask the Egg Whisperer. I'm doing this because I love to answer questions from anyone, anywhere. And I know that not everyone has access to fertility information, and I think that it's important for people to just be equipped with this kind of knowledge so that they know what questions to ask their fertility doctors. So thank you guys for joining. And I'm just going to take a look at the scroll here. Hi everyone, and I'm just curious if in a future Ask the Egg Whisperer I wanted to just have you guys come on, is that something that you guys would want to do? I'm just curious. So if you guys have an opinion, please chat it and let me know, because I'd be curious to see if that's something that people would want to do, is to just chat live with me. I had a few people, I had a few people that reached out and said, yeah, they would actually want to chat live with me, but I don't necessarily want to make people feel uncomfortable. Yes, sign me up. Okay, well that's good to know for the next time. So today I had so many questions that were emailed, messaged, through Instagram, Facebook, and so thank you for all the energy you put into these questions. I'm just going to wait maybe like 30 more seconds for more people to join, and then we'll get started with all the questions that you guys sent in. So someone said something to me the other day, and they said, you know, Aimee, don't you think you've made it? You've helped so many people already have babies. Like, don't you think it's time to just find something else to do, something that's more fulfilling? And my answer to her was like, clearly you don't know who I am, because girl, I just started. The best is yet to come. I'm on a mission, and until everyone knows my Egg Whisperer golden rules, I'm not stopping. I'm not going to stop getting answers for whoever wants the answers. And I know that when it comes to human reproduction and human biology, we don't always have all the answers all the time. I'm humbled every single day, and I'm taught lessons through my experiences, and I hope through the show and all the experts that I bring on that you guys can learn from these experiences as well. Okay, so I'm going to get started right now. Here we go. This is a great question. Hi, I follow you on Instagram. My partner and I have been trying to have a child. I'm 44 years of age, and my partner is 35. You go, girl. We like younger sperm. I've had 2 successful prior pregnancies and we also lost 2 pregnancies after conceiving naturally. The losses occurred around weeks 10 and weeks 12. These 2 pregnancy losses occurred December 19th and April of 2020. I had a D&C with the first and took misoprostol for the second loss. For those of you who don't know what misoprostol is, that's a medical way to manage miscarriages. Both ultrasounds showed no fetal heartbeat, with the overall consensus being that the reason why it happened was because my age was over 40. So I decided not to pursue fertility route yet, wanting to give us some space and time to think things over. But now I found out that I'm pregnant. And after having tested positive for HCG and missed my period by only a few days, here are my questions. I know that my eggs are old and that this embryo may not hold. Is there a way that a specialist can monitor early stages of pregnancy to see if this egg is a good or bad one? It's troubling to think that I have to wait for my 10-week mark until I could possibly miscarry. My partner and I don't want to go through another miscarriage, understanding that I'm in the 8 to 10% chance of having a good egg. Any thoughts on if I should let this one go or ride it out, given my previous history? So here's what I would do. Monitor, check your levels. I mean, you hear me say, get your levels checked all the time. When it comes to early pregnancy, I tell my patients to do the same thing. Check your HCG progesterone level. Repeat it in 2 days. Repeat it in another 2 days, depending on what that level is. Do 3 checks. Maybe a week later, check it again. Do an early ultrasound, even if it's around 5.5 weeks. See where that pregnancy is located. Look at the landmarks. Ask yourself, what is going on? Our hearts hurt so badly when we find out that a pregnancy is abnormal, but I find out early for my patients. And I think that's important to give women this option. Trust me, if a man was pregnant, and I'm sure you guys can all agree with this, if a man was ever going to be pregnant, he would not be waiting 10 weeks, because no man would be waiting 10 weeks to find out if a pregnancy was normal or not. We just know that they can't handle that. But it's just so unfair for us as women that we're told that we have to wait almost 3 months to find out if a pregnancy is viable or not. So my approach, I call it the TLC approach, and I treat every pregnancy like a VIP pregnancy, because they truly are VIP to me. And I do think that you can find practitioners out there just like me that will do the same thing. And by checking your HCG and progesterone levels, you may find out that maybe supporting your pregnancy with progesterone could be helpful. And there might be other checks you want to do, like checking your thyroid, taking aspirin. You know, these are things that we sometimes do for women who are over 40. They can help prevent preeclampsia. Some studies now show it might prevent preterm labor and delivery. And then once you reach the 9-week mark, you can certainly do the NIPT and consider more invasive testing like the CVS or amniocentesis. But those are my recommendations for anyone who is lucky enough to find themselves pregnant over the age of 40, wondering what's going on. That's what I would do if it were me. And I have no problem telling people what I would do if it were me. Any time of day, I'll treat everyone as if they're a family member and tell them exactly what I would do. Okay, here are another series of great questions. Here we go. If a sperm, quote unquote, looks good, i.e. has normal sperm characteristics such as morphology, etc., does it mean, in fact, it is good and that it can lead to a pregnancy? Here's the background. My husband has an atrophic testicle from a previous orchitis infection. As a result, his FSH is high, his DNA fragmentation is normal, but his reactive oxidation stress levels in his semen are high. Despite this, his regular semen analysis is normal, and hence my doctor does not think we have male factor infertility. We just completed an egg retrieval, and all our 12 fertilized embryos were growing normally up to day 3, but after day 3, we started to see a drop and ended up with only 3 normal embryos by day 5 and 7. Okay, first of all, my reaction to that is amazing, awesome. I never put the word only in front of the word 3. Anytime you have an embryo, that is a good day. I get so excited to share with my patients. I call it blast off. I think it's kind of funny to say that. Anytime I have a blast, it's a celebration, because certainly you learn a lot when you go through an IVF cycle, and sometimes you learn that you don't have a blastocyst for a family for them to be able to use in the future, and that's really heartbreaking. To go through all the shots, the bloating, the egg retrieval, the expense, then to not get a blastocyst royally sucks, and that is an understatement of the century. So here's the question. Can taking supplements such as vitamin C and E improve the sperm? And the answer is yes. I don't know if you guys probably all know about my Tushy method, TUSHY method.com. I also have another method for guys. It's called Balls method. Yes, balls. I know. And I actually just got it trademarked in the US and in Europe, and I'm super excited because I think someone might steal it. No one's going to steal it. But anyways, I just think that it's a fun thing to say. Anyways, so part of the Balls method is looking at the background genetics, anatomy, lifestyle, labs, and talk about sex, because that's kind of like what I do a lot of. But certainly there are supplements that can help with sperm. But if you already have 3 embryos that are really strong and the DNA fragmentation is really good, I don't know that you necessarily need to take a step back and start thinking about that kind of stuff. The next question is, how important is sperm quality in IVF? Most doctors I meet tell me IVF is all about the egg, especially now that we have ICSI. And the answer is sperm totally matters. I mean, every embryo is 50% egg, 50% sperm. So sperm is so important. It's literally 50% of the momlet. See, that's a joke. So when it comes to making a momlet, I want to make sure that I have the very best ingredients. I want them to be the freshest. So I put sperm, for example, through a sperm fitness challenge, and I do all these tests ahead of time, like the sperm DNA fragmentation test. I don't like surprises. I don't like sperm emergencies. I like to know the diagnosis before the plan, right? So for those of you who are just catching this now and haven't gotten to know me, I'm all about making things easy to understand for people so you know what questions to ask your doctor. So I came up with something called the Egg Whisperer diet. And no, it's not a recipe. I have no idea how to use my oven at home. Well, maybe I just do kind of. But it's basically diagnosis before your IVF cycle, followed by endometrial testing or embryo transfer preparation, followed by your transfer. So that's really the Egg Whisperer diet. So I hope that by hearing these things and listening to me right now on the Ask the Egg Whisperer show that I'm doing right now, you guys will learn a lot. So yes, certainly sperm is super important. Okay, let's go to our next page of questions. Here we go. Would love to talk about elevated prolactin and its possible effects on fertility for your next Q&A. I've been prescribed bromocriptine, but still plan to move forward with IVF soon. Just wondering if prolactin can be the hidden issue. It doesn't seem widely discussed, and I know no one else with the issue except me. So this is the thing. High prolactin levels are pretty common. They're also really common in women who have PCOS. And that's actually why I created the Tushy method. The H in the Tushy is hormones. Get your hormones checked. And that's not just the FSH, estradiol, and AMH. That includes prolactin and TSH. So if you have a high prolactin and it's affecting how you ovulate, then certainly yes, it can definitely affect your ability to get pregnant. It can affect how you make other hormones like progesterone. And we all know that progesterone, if you've watched my show, you know what I call it. I call it water to a marathon runner. So if a marathon runner is running a race, you don't want to give the marathon runner progesterone at the end. That would be really, really mean for that runner. So same thing for the embryo. You want to support that embryo. Progesterone stands for promote gestation or implantation. And so if you have a high prolactin, sometimes you're not going to make a really healthy amount of progesterone. So that's the reason why getting your prolactin checked is important. Treating it ahead of time is important. And if you address and look at all the hormones, then it tends not to be a big deal. If your prolactin level is super high, then sometimes in pregnancy, if you have, let's say, a microadenoma or a macroadenoma, that can grow and can cause other symptoms. We like to get ahead of these things ahead of time. I think I said ahead maybe 2 or 3 times. Okay, here's another great question. Hello, loved the recent Egg Whisperer shows. Well, thank you. Keep the good content coming. Thank you so much. This is about a frozen embryo transfer. Here we go. My first FET was successful and yielded a healthy baby boy. The 2 following FETs resulted in biochemical pregnancies. They were both genetically normal embryos. I'll be undergoing an ERA before my next transfer. Curious if the use of prednisone will alter the results, or is it solely dependent on the hormonal exposure? Also, how much progesterone do you typically prescribe per day? My first RE had me administer 1 cc morning and night. My current RE has me do 1 cc every night, so half the dose. Curious to get your thoughts. Okay, let's break this question down. So question number 1, for those of you who don't know what the ERA test is, I consider it like the Evite for your embryo transfer party. Everyone wants to show up on time to a party. Well, I mean, unless you're Iranian. If you guys know any Iranian people like me, we kind of tend not to show up too early. We kind of show up really, really late. But for the one party you want to show up on time to, it would be your embryo transfer party. So the ERA test kind of tells us that. It tells us how many hours of progesterone your body needs in order for implantation to occur. That's how I think about it. It's a practice run. I call it an implantation testing cycle or mock embryo transfer cycle. I use those terms to kind of describe what it is. It can also be considered a dress rehearsal for the main show. You know, like having a dress rehearsal just gets you prepared and ready for your lines. I'm pretty good at these analogies today, just today though. So my feeling is that whether you take a steroid or not, like prednisone, that won't impact your ERA results. Really, in my experience, the only thing that matters is the progesterone timing. I know some people think that the mode of progesterone does make a difference. I tend not to, and we all have very strong opinions of how we practice and what we do, and it's based on our experience. And it doesn't mean that what I'm saying is right or whatever someone else says is wrong. It's just this is what we're comfortable with. When you walk into someone's restaurant and you want to tell them to use a different pot or pan, that can be very uncomfortable for that chef. See, for me, when it comes to mixing the ingredients and getting people ready, I have a way that I feel really comfortable with. And I always tell patients, do what your doctor feels really comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with what they're doing, ask them, why are you doing this? Can you check my hormone levels to make me feel comfortable? How about consider doing a different way, and have them explain to you why they're doing the things that they're doing. And I should have a sign behind my head that really says, ask more questions, because you can never really ask enough. So keep asking until you're done. And if you need to make post-test consults or pre-ERA consults to talk to your doctor, or even talk to the company that's going to do your ERA test, I highly recommend that. So the other part of this question is, my first RE had me on 1 cc of progesterone in the morning and at night, and the other one had just 1 cc per day. My style is to order 100 milligrams per ml of progesterone. I do it from a compounding pharmacy that makes it an ethyl oleate. And the reason is that I find that it's better tolerated than other formulations like sesame seed oil or in olive oil. But of course, everyone's different. Everyone is. I mean, I have patients who tolerate ethyl oleate beautifully. And then I have other patients who they take one shot and they have a big reaction. So I have to switch them to sesame seed oil. But for the most part, sesame seed oil, in my experience, is not as well tolerated as ethyl oleate. So that's my style. And sometimes I alternate between the endometrine and the progesterone and oil. So doing a combination of the two. So there are no two patients that are exactly alike. No two protocols are going to be exactly alike. But my style is to do things as I'm listening to my patient that totally makes sense for her and adjusting as needed. Okay. Can you guys tell that I can do this all day long, like 24 hours a day? This is way fun for me. So thank you guys for tuning in and listening. I might be taking sips of water between questions so that I can keep talking without sounding like a frog or that I swallowed a frog. Okay, here's another question. Thank you for your shows. This is about endometriosis. I'm 38 years old with endometriosis stage 4, laparoscopy done 2018. Tried to conceive naturally for a year. I'm at my 3rd IVF cycle now. My AMH before laparoscopy was 1.8. She's going to give us a rundown of her IVF cycles right now. First cycle, 8 eggs retrieved, 3 blastocysts, all abnormal. Second cycle, 4 eggs retrieved, 2 blasts, all abnormal. Blast quality was AA. My current cycle, 5 eggs retrieved, 3 mature fertilized, 2 matured, and I'll be updated soon. I've decided not to do PGS and to try to transfer frozen since I'm getting 100% abnormal results. Doctor supports me. I feel like I'll get all abnormal results again, so I want to take my chance. Am I making the right decision? Here's the background. I'll be 39 in August. I had a natural pregnancy at 32, but I miscarried at week 9. How long should I wait to start the next IVF? I'm preparing myself for the negative results. How often is it okay to do IVF? How long should I take breaks in between? My clock is ticking. Okay, so my approach to endometriosis is, how bad is it? Are you having really bad symptoms? Because if you're making abnormal blastocysts, you have to ask yourself, is endometriosis affecting the outcome? If you've gone through so many cycles and you continue to have embryos that are abnormal, you have to ask yourself, is this just age or a combination of age and endometriosis? And it sounds like in this follower's question, endometriosis may be affecting things negatively. And so I don't think it would be a bad idea in a case like this to consider doing a laparoscopy surgery before your next IVF cycle. Truly, it really depends on the amount of endometriosis that's there. My personal belief is that if you have cysts of endometriosis on the ovaries, especially if they're larger than, let's say, 2 centimeters, it might make sense to remove them. And then the other question I would ask, how have you been prepared with supplements? I have my special sauce. I have a special sauce for all the different types of diagnosis. For example, for a patient who has endometriosis, and again, these are not my expert opinions about this case, these are just my thoughts on a whim, right? So my thoughts would be to take N-acetylcysteine, CoQ10. I got 2 other things in my special sauce. The other 2 things are pterostilbene and NAD. So taking those supplements might help improve the egg quality. And if I'm improving egg quality, I might have a higher likelihood of having an embryo that has normal chromosomes. And the other thing that I add, if you didn't do it already, is HGH. And I like to sometimes start it even a cycle before or even 2 cycles before the IVF cycle starts. So those are some things to talk about. How are you going to prepare for your next IVF cycle? Would it make sense to do a laparoscopy, yes or no? And then, of course, you guys heard me say it before, that every embryo is 50% egg, 50% sperm. So do dive deep into that sperm and maybe consider some advanced sperm testing to make sure we're not missing a high DFI or DNA fragmentation index, and maybe have your partner go through a sperm fitness challenge too. Because I know we put ourselves through so much when we go through IVF. And the last thing I want to do is have patients find out later, especially if you transition to an egg donor, that your egg donor embryos look the same as your own egg embryos, and you wish someone had told you beforehand that looking at the sperm would have been a good idea. So endometriosis is a tough one. So for that follower, I would say maybe consider doing a laparoscopy before your next cycle, adding special supplements as well to address the issue. Okay, here's another question. Let me go here. Okay, I was recently diagnosed with PCOS. My husband also was told that his morphology is at 3.5%. We were told that this was probably due to environmental factors. Is there any way to improve the morphology? Well, yeah. I mean, morphology has to do with the shape of the sperm. I have a sperm cell here. So let's say here's a sperm cell, okay? Every sperm has a head, neck, and tail. You want a normally shaped sperm cell to be able to fertilize an egg, right? Eggs are gonna be like, oh, you're funny looking, I'm not letting you in. No way. So if a sperm cell is normally shaped, the egg will be like, right on, let's make a baby. That's the goal. We want good looking sperm. So how do we get good looking sperm? Well, you gotta do the sperm fitness challenge like I described to you guys. I have my regimen. Guys, we want you to sleep really well. We want you to eat a plant-based diet, avoiding red meat if you can. Avoid alcohol. I would say, in moderation, but if you're someone who moderation means a whole bottle of wine, then I would say maybe it makes sense to cut the alcohol out completely. And then the other thing is no THC. I'm sorry, I know it's legal, but save it for later. CBD products, same thing. They potentially could affect sperm. Exercise most days of the week and decrease stress. I know that life is stressful, and that's like a huge understatement. It's really, really stressful right now. And so whatever you can do to like meditate, be mindful of what's going on around you. I mean, I listen to music. You probably have already know what kind of music I listen to relax. I listen to electronic dance music. I don't know if you know that. So that's kind of what I do to relax. So get your mojo back, and that might potentially help your morphology. And the other thing, obviously, is to look for a varicocele or dilated vein on the testicle. And you've heard me already say it, is to do advanced sperm testing as well. So here are some more questions from this follower. We've done Clomid now without success. I'm currently on letrozole and dexamethasone. Due to both of our factors, we were told that IVF was probably the way to go and advised that we could try an IUI with the medications I just listed if this doesn't work. She advised to move to IVF because we have a 4% shot that the IUI may work. I've been reading that people do a couple rounds of letrozole and IUI before moving on. Should we give it more time or move on to IVF? I'm 26 years old, and as far as my husband, he's 30 years old, and the only issue is the morphology issue. So this is the thing. There's no magic number of IUIs that you should feel like you need to do before doing IVF. I mean, I don't know why your doctor is saying you should do IVF other than the morphology. I think that it would make sense to maybe try 2 to 3 IUIs, and if that isn't successful, ask yourself the question, how many kids do I want? Am I doing the right treatment for the diagnosis that I have? Is there anything I can do to make the treatment that I'm doing work better? So some of the things that I will suggest after a cycle of IUI isn't working, I'll say, have I maximized the number of eggs safely that you could ovulate? I sometimes like to help patients ovulate 2 eggs in a case like this. Think of it as like target shooting. If the sperm has enough targets to hit, hopefully it'll hit 1, especially when there's a morphology issue. The other thing to consider doing is a double IUI. So that's not 2 IUIs in one day. Although if you're 30 years old and you're a guy, I mean, chances are you could probably do that in one day. And you can punk your husband and be like, honey, we're going to do 2 IUIs in 2 hours. Now go. But that might not be very funny. So typically, let's say if you're ovulating today and today's a Wednesday, or I'm going to trigger your ovulation tonight and today's Wednesday, then I'll do 1 IUI on Thursday and 1 IUI on Friday. And I recommend practicing for the IUI and that semen collection. Like, don't save up. I don't want saved up sperm. Trust me, saved up sperm looks awful under a microscope. I like fresh sperm, and people are freaked out because they're like, oh my God, but then the volume is going to be so low. And I'm like, I don't care. I only need 2 sperm cells, but I just need really, really good sperm cells that know exactly what to do, that look really good. Okay. So I think we're all scared about doing things like having sex before the IUI and saving up for the IUI. And sometimes those things may not actually make the most sense, but sometimes they do make sense in a particular situation. So definitely talk to your doctor first. Okay. Here's another question. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this is a great one. Could you please talk about how safe is egg freezing? It's becoming more widely criticized that the kids born from frozen eggs have higher chances of developing some sort of abnormalities or cancers. Many women spend a fortune life savings to have a chance of becoming a mother one day. These critical questions should be addressed to get some reassurance on these costly procedures. Well, I'm going to plug my egg freezing class. So if you guys know of anyone who's considering egg freezing and just wants to be in an environment where they can learn more about the process in a course with other folks, go to eggwhispererschool.com. But I consider egg freezing a safe procedure. I mean, I've heard other people use an analogy. They say it's basically like a blood draw through your ovaries. The complication rate is less than 1%. And you don't have to do the things that other people do. And what I mean by that is you don't have to take high doses of hormones to get a ton of eggs frozen. You can design the protocol that suits your needs. Like, for example, if I were to cycle my daughter, for example, when she's 20 years old and have her freeze her eggs, I'm probably just going to have her take some fertility pills, maybe a small dose of shots, and maybe get like 8 eggs from her, and that should be fine because each egg, when you're in your early 20s, has about a 95% chance almost of being genetically normal. Whereas when you're older, you want to have more eggs because it's obviously a numbers game, and more is always more. Less is more when you have less, but if you have less, then you have to say that it's all about quality, not quantity. You see, I do this quite often, and I just do it over and over because I just want to express these things in a way so people feel good about themselves, because unfortunately we can't change them. So my point is, as far as the safety of egg freezing, it's just as safe as IVF in that the vitrification process that we use has been used for over a decade, and we have long-term studies that show that the kids are no worse off from kids born naturally. However, there are people who are at higher risk of things like cancer, and that's why I do genetic cancer screening for my patients. And about 3 or 4 times a year at least, I actually do pick up a positive cancer gene in a patient of mine, and then I say, wow, yes, this patient will have a higher risk of having cancer, and now I can help her prevent that. But I don't necessarily think that the process of going through IVF or egg freezing will increase her chance of having cancer or her child's chances of having cancer in the future. This is fun. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm having a blast. And I see all these questions here. I'm going to go through all the questions that were emailed, and then I'll totally get to the live chatted questions as fast as I can. Here's another question. Dr. Aimee, thanks for answering my questions on your live Q&A. I greatly appreciate it. I do have a few questions I was hoping you don't mind addressing. Some background: I'm 34 years old, PCOS, diagnosed with unexplained infertility. My husband and I have been trying for the past 2 years unsuccessfully. He has a 3% morphology, count of 11 million, and high motility of 63%. His DNA fragmentation test was 8%. Given we have had 3 failed IUIs, would you recommend a 4th or going on to IVF? So my golden rule, you guys can probably now answer the question if you know my golden rules. Any woman who's 32 years old who wants 2 kids and doesn't already have 1, I want you to consider embryo freezing or egg freezing or both. I mean, we hear people constantly saying freeze your eggs by the time maybe 32 years old. And I think when you're partnered, we aren't telling people this enough and sharing the important information about how you can secure future options for yourself as a family when you're partnered, even if you're not with donor sperm, for example, and consider embryo freezing. So I would say that with the number of eggs that you have, it's still totally reasonable to consider another IUI. And then if you guys are so lucky to get pregnant, that would be awesome and amazing. Then after you deliver your baby, you can do an IVF cycle then to secure more options for yourself for the future. And then 1.5 years later, depending on how, spread apart you want your kids, you can start trying at that time. Here's another part of the question. When do you advise patients to use ICSI? What's the benefit over traditional IVF? I get this question a lot. And then when it comes to IVF versus ICSI, when someone, for example, so this follower mentioned that she has unexplained infertility, and you guys know me, right? There's no such thing as unexplained infertility. I can hear you guys all saying that right now. One of the possibilities, I like to share possibilities with my patients. One of the possibilities is a fertilization issue. And so when I have someone who's ovulating beautiful eggs and the sperm looks great and the egg and sperm aren't coming together, I say one of the explanations could be a fertilization issue. And in this follower's case, she mentioned that there could be a fertilization issue because The morphology was less than 6% normal, and the sperm count was 11 million. 11 million sperm cells should be able to do the job, but unfortunately, we need a lot more normally shaped sperm cells sometimes to accomplish fertilization through natural intercourse or IUI. So in this case, I would say I would choose ICSI. It sounds like you may not need PCSI. PCSI is a more stringent way of picking out genetically normal sperm cells because you did the DNA fragmentation test. And if it was pretty recent and it was good, you may not need to do that. So in this case, I would say I would pick ICSI. So now she has a question about my special sauce. I'm currently taking several supplements to help my egg quality. Remember guys, she has PCOS, inositol, CoQ10, NAC, and lipoic acid. Which supplements do you highly recommend for men? So there are two. So Theralogics has something called Conception XR. So you guys can go to the Theralogics.com website and use the code TUSHY, TUSHY, all caps for the PRC price. So it's a slightly lower price. The other one is Alpha Sperm. So you can go to alphasperm.com and use the code EggWhisperer50, all caps, for 50% off. They're both excellent supplements that I recommend for guys. But for a guy with a lower count, one of the things that I do recommend is all the stuff you guys have already heard from me before. Exercising most days of the week, eating really healthy, trying to sleep well, decreasing stress, and try to find joy every single day, however you can. Actively think about the things that you can do to bring joy back into your life. Okay, and actually you can follow Paula Jenkins. She has an awesome podcast. It's Jumpstart Your Joy. She's actually the producer of this show, and I know she's watching now. Hi, Paula. So you guys should follow her. She has amazing interviews with different experts on joy. There are people who actually are experts in this, and I highly recommend you guys follow her. So here's another question that we have. I'm going to take a sip of water. One moment, please. Please hold. I feel like I should have music in the background. Maybe next time we'll bring in a DJ for these questions. But I'd love to chat with you guys live. So at the beginning of the show, I actually queried you guys and said, would you guys be interested in chatting live next time and having a live Q&A rather than me looking like a crazy fertility Dr. Lunatic talking to myself the whole time? I'm okay looking like this. I'm okay, because if anyone can learn from this, that's all I really care about. Don't care about how I look. Here's a question. Thank you, Dr. Aimee. Hi there. I love your show and your Instagram page. Thank you. If you don't love my show, don't tell me, okay? Okay, I wanted to ask a question about hypothalamic amenorrhea. The other name for it is HA. I'm a 33-year-old married woman who's been trying to conceive for the last 2 years. I've struggled with amenorrhea on and off my entire life. I never was an athlete and honestly always hated exercise, but every time I did any sort of exercise, my periods always stopped. I also suffer from disordered eating patterns with binging and restricting, which I know is a yo-yo lifestyle and it's not serving me well. I'm at a healthy weight now. I never took fertility seriously until this year. I'm making slow changes to my lifestyle, but I don't want to wait 4 years to have a child. I'm in talks with a fertility specialist to start what he recommends. Menopur this fall. And for those of you who don't know how to really produce Menopur, pronounce it. It's Menopur. It's actually way more fun when you pronounce it like it's a French name. I'm kidding, it's Menopur, but I like saying Menopur. It just sounds like I'm more sophisticated. Okay, as I slowly work on my lifestyle, I eat tons of veggies, healthy fats, eggs, fruits, etc., but my body still isn't happy because my diet is so all over the place. Is there hope for me? And she shares her levels. FSH is around 4, LH is 1, AMH is 5.5. I'm not even sure medications will help. What advice do you have for me? Okay, so the relationship that we have with food as women is sometimes one of the most complicated relationships that we can have in our entire lives. And it can just it can stay with us for years into our 30s, even to our 40s. And the disordered eating that a lot of people experience before being infertility patients can even carry over as infertility patients and then into pregnancy. So for the followers asking this question, you guys know me. Get your fertility team in place. Make sure you're talking to your therapist now more than ever. Talk to them, talk to a nutritionist. It sounds like you have a great regimen of healthy eating, but once you're pregnant, sometimes it can trigger the disordered eating again. Next, there's a ton of hope for you. There's no doubt a ton of hope. I mean, your age, the number of follicles that you have, it sounds like you're so brave and courageous. You're making these steps to see a fertility doctor and you're making plans. You have a roadmap. And next, Menopur works. I mean, you have a diagnosis, and now you're going to move forward with treatment. And Menopur is the hormone FSH and LH, and these medications talk directly to the ovaries down here, and then it gets your egg to grow. And yes, I do have an egg today. I had a sperm, so of course you expected me to have an egg as well. So that's one style of doing things. However, I do think that some patients react to the fertility pills really well when you have hypothalamic amenorrhea, so I think it's worth a chance. I always tell patients it might be less than 25% chance that if you take ovulation induction medications like letrozole or Clomid, that you'll respond. But if it were me, and remember, I'll always tell you guys what I would do if it were me. If it were me, I'd kind of want to see if the fertility pills work. And if they did, then I didn't have to give myself a shot every single night. And the pills are a heck of a lot cheaper than the fertility shots. And if it works, great. But if it doesn't, that's okay. Then you can consider the Menopur before too long. But at least you know what your options are. But like I said, Menopur works really well for hypothalamic amenorrhea. How are you guys doing? Are you having as much fun as I am? Yes, I hear all you guys out there. Remember, next time we'll have a DJ. Okay, here is another question. What's the best time to trigger for an IUI? My doctor triggered me with one 19.5 millimeter follicle, one 14.5 millimeter follicle, and one 13.5 millimeter follicle, and I'm 31 years old. Potential PCOS, normal weight, tubes open. Do you think we should have waited for the smaller ones to catch up? I already had one failed IUI before. So let me answer that question first. When you already have a 19.5 millimeter follicle, that 14.5 millimeter follicle probably will not catch up. It probably won't. But I'll tell you again what I would do if it were me. I'm all about tracking stuff. You guys already know that about me. So if a patient of mine came in and I saw a 19, a 14, and 13, I'd be like, hey, let's do this. Let's check some levels, maybe an estradiol, LH, and progesterone. Have you check an OPK twice a day. And let's just kind of see what happens. Maybe we don't need to trigger tonight. Maybe if we wait one more day, we can then see if we can get that 14 or 13 up. And sometimes I can add a little whiff of a fertility shot too, like Follistim or Gonal F. That's basically FSH hormone to grow that other egg. It also depends on your age. I mean, if you're, let's say, under 35, that second or third egg might not be needed. But if you're, let's say, over 35, I can tell you that my style is definitely to help patients ovulate more than one egg so you can have 2 chances or even 3 chances in one cycle. Because the more eggs you ovulate, sometimes that gives us a higher chance of having one healthy pregnancy if you're over 35. Here's another great part of this question. Do you think, sorry, let me just say this again. My husband had 12 million total motosperm after the wash, which I was a little disappointed about. Shh, don't tell him that. You know what I mean? I mean, shh, just kidding. Both of these IUIs failed, and I'm going to do one more with Clomid again. Any overall tips to increase chances? Well, first of all, 12 million is still just fine. And I would say maybe do another formal semen analysis. There's a really easy way of doing a semen analysis now without having to leave your house, collect in a cup. There's a company, and it's meatfellow.com. Anytime I say meat, I think of a piece of meat, but I know it's not meat. It's like meet a fellow, like meet a sperm cell, a fellow. Even though not every sperm cell is a fellow, some are X's and some are Y's, whatever. They didn't ask me about what to name their company, but it's meetfellow.com. And then you can do /egg whisper, and I think they'll give you 20% off. They should give me a cut, if you know what I mean, but they totally don't. And that's why I'm always looking for the coolest things out there to bring to you guys so you know about it. And no one pays me anything. Clearly, there's no sponsorship of anything that I do. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, so her question, any tips for overall success? So again, one of the things I do, and just because I do it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone should do it or needs to do it. But remember, practice makes perfect. Prepare for that IUI day. Be sure to have sex leading up to it. That will help with sperm quality. Don't save up. We don't want saved up sperm on the day of the IUI. And then just know going into it that you did your very best. And having that number of sperm cells is actually quite good, 12 million. And the reason why I'm thinking maybe it makes sense to do another semen analysis is to look at the morphology or the shape of the sperm. Because if the morphology is on the low side, then IUI success might be a little bit lower, and you might want to change your plan and consider ICSI, or maybe have your partner see a male fertility specialist to rule out a varicocele or a dilated vein on the testicle. Okay, I'm going to go to another question now, but I'm going to take a sip of water, and I promise I'm going to get to your questions that you guys have chatted with me. Here's a great question. I'm 30 years old and I live in the islands. I've never been pregnant. After trying or not preventing pregnancy for a year plus, nothing has happened. I learned after doing some checks that I have a lower AMH for my age, 1.7 nanograms per ml, and stage 3 bordering stage 4 endometriosis. Before I go on, I just want to share 30 years old with an AMH of 1.7 is still good. Translation, 17 eggs, right? My job is not rocket science. I mean, sometimes I feel like it feels like it is, but it really isn't. You can take someone's AMH level and kind of predict how many eggs that you might be able to get from them from an egg retrieval cycle. And a 30-year-old with 17 eggs is pretty darn good. The egg viability at 30 is excellent. So I'm feeling really positive about that AMH, and it just annoys me slightly. It gets slightly under my skin when people are told things that like they're bad or their level's not good, because these are just diagnostic tools to guide us. They don't tell us about the quality of you. And when you're 30, you have good eggs because they're 30-year-old eggs. So here's the rest of the question. I've started consultation and was told that I needed 3 months of Zoladex to shrink the endometriosis before IVF, which will be done abroad. It will also help with egg quality. I was already told I would not get as many eggs as someone who's not in my situation. I was planning on starting sooner, but damn COVID-19 has pushed back everything. Flights have, however, resumed with protocols in place. Do you think I can wait until next year? Or should I proceed with the 3 injections, IVF cycle, and transfer? I'm wondering if I push it back further, I would have missed the opportunity with my own eggs, which I would prefer to use. So here's my recommendation. Number 1, my special sauce, N-acetylcysteine, CoQ10, and then maybe consider pterostilbene, maybe even Ovasitol or something similar. You don't have to get that brand inositol or myoinositol, as well as melatonin at night. There's so many books about endometriosis, diet, supplements out there. I definitely recommend that you read them and start taking these things. And my recommendation, if you were a family member, I would say go for it now. I wouldn't wait a year, because endometriosis, it just gets worse over time. And I would say that given your young age and a doctor that really cares for you right now and is really giving you a great plan, I would take advantage of that and not wait longer. Could you wait a year? Totally. Our fertility declines over time. It's not overnight. So at 30, waiting until you're 31, I think that's fine. But I think that with knowing how aggressive endometriosis can be and knowing that your stage is stage 3 or stage 4 already, it may not be a bad idea to move forward now. Okay, guys, I'm almost done with all the emailed questions, and we'll get to all the live chatted questions here in a second. I just did InvoCell. For those of you guys who don't know what InvoCell, it's a vaginal chamber that we place in the vagina after we collect eggs, and we put sperm in there as well. I think I was naive. My question is, should you be monitored during stimulation? My doctor does not monitor during stimulations. My doctor has you come in on day 10 when they decide if you should trigger or not. Is this normal? If it's not, can the stim process be discussed on live so others who don't know IVF don't make the same mistake? So for those of you who don't know what InvoCell is, I just explained it to you, but basically it's designed in some markets, some parts of the country, it's designed to be a low-cost way of doing IVF. This is what you need to know. It's just basically IVF. That's what it is. But instead of culturing your embryos in a lab, you culture them in your vagina. So if you're going to go through IVF, I tell my patients, I want you to have a really high success rate. The only reason I tell a patient to do InvoCell is if you really want the experience of incubating the embryos in your vagina. Yes, I did just say that. And yes, there are people who really want that experience. And yes, I've definitely had patients who've had live births from InvoCell. But I think the best candidates for InvoCell are patients potentially who would be open to doing a traditional IVF cycle if the InvoCell didn't work and really are looking for that experience. And I think that the pregnancy rates, and that's what I share with people, and again, ask your doctor what their pregnancy rates are with InvoCell. I think it's only about 10 to 15% above what an IUI pregnancy rate is, and I think IVF pregnancy rates about double what InvoCell is, in my experience. Again, Just because this is my experience doesn't mean it's your doctor's experience. And I should probably do a show just about InvoCell and what you should know and the questions you should ask before you do it. But I'm just sharing with you these tips because I really want to get to the live chatted questions here in a second. Here's another question. Hi, Dr. Aimee, love your page and I've been tuning in. Excited for live chat tomorrow. My question is regarding the timing for the ERA and Receptiva test. I'm 35 and I have one normal frozen embryo from a retrieval in June and planning on doing round 2 of IVF this August. Is it best to wait and do the ERA and Receptiva test after my next retrieval, or should I make use of my time now in between? So this is what I would do. Take your supplements, relax, rest in between, do your next IVF cycle, then do implantation cycle testing. I don't necessarily like to do the implantation cycle after an IVF cycle because the meds can suppress the ovaries. They can make it harder for the ovaries to wake up because I give patients estrogen, and estrogen can suppress them. It prevents ovulation. And so it's harder to wake them up, and I might get a lower number of eggs. So that would be my recommendation for you. So certainly ask your doctor too. And then the other question is, I'm worried about endometriosis. Does it make sense to do a laparoscopic surgery before a second round of IVF if I have most of the endometriosis symptoms? Again, I think it really depends on the quality of the embryos that you had from the first cycle. If you had gorgeous embryos, don't mess with success. Don't go in there and do a laparoscopy right now. I would consider waiting until after your implantation testing or mock cycle. Do the Receptiva test, find out if you have, what's going on, and then potentially do a laparoscopy. The other thing I do for my patients, especially if it's very obvious you have endometriosis, I time the biopsy and coordinate it with the laparoscopic surgeon so that you're doing the biopsy on the same day as you're doing the laparoscopy and Receptiva test on the same day. So you're not wasting your time. It makes it super, super efficient. Okay. Here's another question. When is the best time to test your AMH? So for me, I tell patients that you can really test at any time. There might be some cycle variability, and certainly like if someone's AMH comes back low, I'll often repeat it because there might be a lab variation, especially if they've had a previous level that was higher. And then if you're on birth control pills, I always tell patients it could be suppressed as much as 20%. But I like to be efficient. I don't just like to check the AMH. I like to check FSH and estradiol and a follicle count too. So putting all that information together can give patients a pretty good picture of what's going on with their bodies. Here's another question. I started IVF 2 days ago. When I have a headache, is it okay to take Advil? And the answer is yes, but obviously talk to your doctor. I have no problem with my patients treating the symptoms they have as they go through their IVF cycle. If you have a headache, treat it. If you have nausea, let me know. I'll prescribe a medication for you. If you have bloating and cramping, use a heating pad. Really important to talk to your doctor about these kinds of tips. The other question she asked is, can we have sex the day before the egg retrieval day? Honestly, I know very few people that want to have sex the day before the egg retrieval day. You're pretty bloated, you're pretty uncomfortable, and you really typically don't want anyone touching you. But if you do, I think that's okay. I always tell patients, listen to your body. It doesn't scare me if people have sex before egg retrieval day, but again, talk to your doctor. And then you might have heard, if you've watched my show before, I talk about outer course, I won't even start making jokes, but orgasms are never dangerous when you're on fertility treatment. Okay, so I'm almost done with the emailed questions. Thank you guys for hanging in with me. Here we go. I'm 44 years old, mini IVF, starting with esterase 8 days after my next ovulation. I'm going to be given Clomid, FSH 225, 150 Menopur plus dexamethasone, and cetrotide. Whew, that should be a rap song. Does this sound like a good plan? What would you do? Also, what do you think about luteal phase stimulation? Thanks so much. Okay, totally what I would do, except I hate Clomid. And just because I hate Clomid doesn't mean that you have to hate Clomid, but I hate Clomid. I think Clomid has nasty side effects. It makes people feel like they're totally nuts. It makes you feel like you need to call your local church and find out when the next priest is available for your exorcism. However, there are a lot of patients that feel really good on it. So talk to your doctor and be like, I think I might be feeling that this medication may not be good for me because I have depression or anxiety. So maybe switch to letrozole. So I use a lot of letrozole. I do a ton of mini IVF cycles. I call it the hybrid approach. I use a combination of letrozole, 4 tablets per day. Sometimes I use 3, sometimes I even go up to 5. And I do a combination of Menopur and sometimes add Gonal F as well. And I have great outcomes from doing that. And I also use cetrotide or ganirelix too. The other thing I would suggest for this follower who's 44 is You guys can probably already tell what I'm going to say, and that's HGH. So try Omnitrope, consider my special sauce, CoQ10, pterostilbene, NAD, and I know one day I'm going to have more things to add to that. But I have had patients just like you at 44 who've had healthy, normal embryos. And again, it's not a lot of patients. I've tried to help a lot of patients who are over the age of 43, and I have been successful in getting normal embryos. And this is the exact approach that I use as well. As far as luteal phase stimulation, I've definitely done it before. And there are doctors that feel very comfortable with it. I haven't had as much success with it, especially in women who are over the age of 40, as I would like. So I don't feel comfortable with it. But again, just because I don't feel comfortable with it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Because there are doctors that they love doing it and they have great outcomes from it. So I'm like, please feel comfortable doing it. And you would get my not that you need my permission, but you would totally get my blessing to do that. So here's another question. Is IVF harder when you have one ovary and a bicornuate uterus? And my answer to that, I guess it just depends on your age and your AMH level. So get your AMH level checked. If your AMH level is, let's say, over 1 and you're 30 years old or so, then you should have a really good chance of pregnancy success. However, think about bicornuate uterus. Which horn is larger? Bicornuate means 2 separate horns. Make sure you see a high-risk OBGYN specialist, and then talk to a fertility doctor about your family size goals and see what they say about what your chances are, because there are no 2 uteruses that are alike. That should be a bumper sticker. There just isn't. There just isn't. And when you have a bicornuate uterus, both sides aren't going to be exactly alike. So, I take care of patients with uterine anomalies all the time. The other tip that I would give you is make sure you've checked your kidneys to make sure you don't have a kidney malformation, because almost maybe 20% of patients with a bicornuate uterus could also have a kidney issue as well. Okay, let's go to the next question here. Hello, I have a question. I started fertility treatments when I was 39. My AMH at 39 was 0.02. I left a stressful job. The stress is gone, and I just checked my AMH again at 42, and it was 0.45. So at 39, it was 0.02. At 42 is 0.45. Is it possible to get a good egg now? And the answer is your age is the most reliable predictor of pregnancy success. More reliable than anything else, more reliable than an FSH and an AMH. And I would tell you at 42, your chances of a healthy pregnancy are not 0. Your AMH, again, of 0.4, maybe the first one was a lab error, but maybe the second one was a lab error. So again, I would look at the 3 things. FSH, estradiol, AMH actually lied. It should be 4 things. And your AMH, your AFC as well. Look at all of them and then get a really full picture. And then, you know what? Be as aggressive as you feel comfortable being and go for it. Do whatever you can to preserve your fertility, do an egg retrieval, get some embryos, and do as many cycles as you can to give yourself future options. There's no better time than now, especially because you're not stressed out. Okay. Next question. My question is, what can I do after an FET to make sure my embryo implants? I'm 42 years old, and after 3 cycles of IVF, I got 1 embryo, and that's awesome. Congratulations, and I'm really hopeful for you that your embryo is going to stick and grow. So my approach, again, is the Egg Whisperer diet. So you already know your diagnosis. It's your age. You've already done the IVF cycle. Congratulations on getting a healthy embryo. And then next is embryo transfer preparation, and talk to your doctor about doing a cavity evaluation, see if tests like ERA and Receptiva are right for you, and then do your transfer at a time in your life where you have the least amount of stress. So right now, for a lot of people, it may not be a good time, but for some people it might be because they're home and they're not stressed about going in and out of work. So those are my tips. And then yes, pray, and pray some more. That's what she said. What can I do besides pray? So I'm praying for you. Next question. Last one that was emailed to me, and I'll get to the live chatted ones next. I'm 39 years old, carrier of a balanced translocation. I did my first IVF cycle in June. I retrieved 4 eggs and 1 embryo was sent for testing, waiting for results now. Should I start a second cycle without waiting for the PGT results? And I said, yes, I totally would. Just go right into it, see what you get. Each embryo will have probably, I would say, maybe a 5% chance of being genetically normal with that history. And you just never know, right? So just get some more embryos. Am I more fertile now because of all the injections? And the answer is no. I wish that were the case. However, there might be a cumulative benefit if you took Omnitrope or HGH the first time. So potentially there could be a benefit, but just taking the fertility shots and doing an egg retrieval probably doesn't increase our fertility down the line. is there a chance to produce more eggs because of the injections if I don't wait in between cycles? And what I tell patients is just keep showing up. Anytime your period starts, think of me, call me, come in. I'll do a follicle check and we'll see what's going on and see if it's a good cycle or not. And she also shared, I'm starting to take DHEA today. Would it be better to take it for this month and do the second cycle? When it comes to DHEA, it's a really individual, personalized approach that I take with my patients, and I don't generally recommend it for everybody. But if you have a healthy BMI, a good testosterone level, meaning it's not elevated, then potentially DHEA could be helpful for you. And the last question I had emailed was a question about, can you please answer the question, does IVF make you run out of eggs or go into menopause sooner or earlier? And I say no. If I could be here with a life vest on, actually, or some sort of like Baywatch bathing suit, I would, but I'm totally not going to, because I consider myself a lifeguard. I'm an egg rescuer, and I rescue eggs every single day. I'm rescuing them from what's basically a biological process, and women can ovulate 1 egg a month, and we lose all the eggs, and then when we go through IVF, I'm rescuing all the eggs that you would have lost. So I think a lot of people are worried that somehow going through IVF treatment would make you infertile later or go into menopause later. For example, if I, let's say, retrieve 12 eggs, I've heard people say to me, I think this means that I'm gonna go into menopause 12 months sooner, and that's just not the case. Okay, guys, I have all these live chatted questions. I'm going to try and get to them as fast as I can. Here we go. I did 2 IVF cycles, but no embryos reached the blastocyst stage. I'm very sorry to hear that. I would talk to your doctor about genetic screening and to see if we're missing a translocation or something like that. Don't stop. We need people like you so much. Thank you, guys. So happy to get you live. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep going down here before the end of today's show. Any tips on how to regulate your cycle? I found out that I have low AMH and my cycle ranges from 38 to 58 days. So the question is, why is your cycle irregular? And it sounds like it's because your egg count is low. So I would strongly suggest talking to your doctor about ways to maybe preserve your fertility, freeze eggs, freeze embryos, take the supplements that I already talked to you guys about. And when it comes to regulating your cycle, when you have a low supply of eggs, it's not necessarily something that we have control over doing. It's just part of, being a woman. It happens to every single one of us at some point in our life that we have irregular cycles because we've run out of eggs. That's just normal. Human reproduction, human biology. Here's another question. I'm 34 with DOR and endometriosis. I only got 1 5BB out of 11 eggs. What protocol should I do for my next retrieval? AMH is 1.1. Okay, well, first of all, I'm super excited that you got that 5BB. That's awesome. So as far as protocol, in a case like that, I would say natural cycle, meaning no birth control pills ahead of time. That's my style. And just because, again, it's my style doesn't mean that you have to do it, but ask your doctor if that's something that you have the option of doing. I find that sometimes taking birth control pills, especially in women who have a lower embryo yield, might be maybe not as good. I don't want to use words like detrimental or anything like that, but sometimes just going right into it and starting med cycle day number 2 would give us a really good, a better cycle. And I've had those experiences with my patients as well. Another question here is, what about sperm donors? Well, not every sperm bank is alike. So when it comes to sperm banks, you want to ask questions like, how many pregnancies has this person had? And then I actually love working with the sperm bank, Seattle Sperm Bank, for those of you guys who didn't watch the show that we just posted the other day, but I love working with them because they're so transparent. I basically help with photo matching with my patients. I send a photo in and they tell me who the matches would be. And then I kind of think about my patient's personality. And then I tell them, well, this is my patient's personality. Who do you think would be the best match? And they certainly know their donors really, really well. Let's see here. What's the difference between ubiquinone and ubiquinol? It's basically just how your body processes it. I don't think it really matters which one you take. I think you can take either one. I recommend Neo Q10 just because I trust the company about their supplements and the ingredients. What's the difference in progesterone between cottonseed, castor, sesame seed oil? I actually recommend ethyl oleate because ethyl oleate tends to be the easiest, the most hypoallergenic. Next question is, what's considered a high prolactin level? So as far as a high prolactin level, I mean, it just depends on the lab. So you have to look at the reference ranges, but typically people get an MRI if the prolactin level is above 50. Some people get an MRI even if the prolactin prolactin level is above 35. So next question would be, if you have no food allergy to sesame seed oil, does this mean you can tolerate it? Not necessarily. You can still have a reaction. Another question, I'm 38 years old. My AMH was 5.4 last year. I'll be on 450 Menopur. Do you think the dose is suitable for me? So if we're talking about nanograms per milliliter of an AMH at 38, a dose of 450 would be appropriate if your body size is, let's say, a BMI of over 35. Someone's talking about my dreamy eyes, and that's really, really sweet. Okay, guys, I'm almost out of time. I feel so bad because I couldn't get to all your chatted questions. So for those of you who are still watching, would you guys want me to do this again and do it more often? And maybe next time I'll just do the chatted questions, and maybe I'll bring you guys on to chat with me live. I need to see some hearts. Are there any hearts out there? I'm just trying to take a poll. No, not yet. We had hearts for that before, but that's okay. So what I want to say is thank you guys for, I get hearts right now. Thank you guys for watching today. I love what I do. I think you guys are all amazing, and I want you guys to keep fighting and don't give up.